Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Okay, so today is pretty exciting. Okay, you guys remember the Open L edge test series? Okay, well, where I took three pretty much identical Open Ls. These are the high carbon steel versions. I've got two of them that are one size and one of them that's just a half a size larger. I should have ordered three, but I didn't. I just ordered two to match this other one that I had. So one of them's got a 325 grit edge off of a DMT diamond stone with micro bevels. One of them has got a 6,000 grit edge straight off of the 6,000 grit side of a king waterstone. And then the last one has got that same 6,000 grit edge off of that king waterstone, but then I stropped it on the chromium oxide strop on my shaving strop, and then linen, and then leather afterwards. So you've got a very a very aggressive edge, which 325 is my favorite all-time all-around edge. You've got that 6,000 grit waterstone edge, which is kind of a middle of the road as far as fine edges are concerned, and then you've got the extremely polished it's probably a mirror grit finish. I mean, it's pretty fine. So we got the three of those, and then what we're doing is we're testing those in mule deer meat now. So this is one of those tests that I can't just do any time. We do have hunting seasons here in Wyoming, and so I had to wait for hunting season and to be able to pick up a mule deer before I did this test. My boy asked me earlier today, because I told him I was excited to finally do this test, and he said, "Well, why didn't you just go down to the grocery store and pick up a whole bunch of meat and bring it back and cut it all up into little bitty pieces?" And I thought, well, that's awful dang expensive when I know I'm going to be working up a deer pretty soon anyways. So what we've got here is I've got the sirloin out of this mule deer, the top round, the bottom round, and then the eye of the top round. What we're going to do is, like I said, I've got those three Open Ls, and then they've kind of got short, blades. So then I went ahead and I put the same series of edges on my normal 8-inch class chef type knives. This is a straight 1095 Santoku pattern in 1095. This one's got the 325 because it's got no tape on the handle. This one right here is my standard 8-inch chef. It's got the 6,000 grit edge on it, so one strip of blue tape. And then this one right here is, I didn't have another 1095 with a nice lean grind like what those have got. The closest thing I had was I think that's a Guaito pattern. Yeah. But it's in 1095 and 15N20, random pattern, Damascus steel, and I want to say it's like 150-ish layers or so, and it's got two strips of tape on the handle. And it's got the stropped edge, so the mirror polish edge on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those three Open Ls and we're going to test it on the eye of round piece of meat, because it's a smaller piece of meat than the other pieces. And we'll cut it up. We're just going to grind it and we'll throw it into the burger bowl. And then we'll go ahead and we'll chunk up some steaks out of this other stuff. I don't normally do that because if you cut your steaks up individually and then freeze them, you increase your surface area, which increases the amount of meat that gets freezer burned if it does. Usually I will just freeze like a whole sirloin, okay, and then when we want to have steaks, then I'll pull it out, thaw it out. It does take a little bit longer to thaw out, being a big old chunk of meat, but then you've got much less surface area to expose to freezer burn. So hold on a second. Make sure everything is in the frame here. Remember, in the shop, I've got a mirror behind where you guys sit, and so I can kind of see what you're seeing. Here I don't have that. Okay, so let's take Let's take our 325 grit edge. Now granted, this is not on a, a scaled, the cutting board isn't on a scale, so you guys won't be able to tell how much pressure I'm putting behind it, but you will kind of get, an idea about how easy the knife passes through the meat, just by watching me cut. You can see, look for, the muscles in my hand to be flexing harder than others. If there's a thumbnail in there, or a fingernail, you can see if it's getting whiter or not for the amount of pressure that I'm putting in. How hard I'm having to squeeze the rest of it to hold it still while I'm cutting, those sort of deals. So since this piece is going up into burger, and we can't cut it up too small because then the grinder will have problems. But we'll go ahead and make 3 cuts with this one and 3 cuts with each one of them, and then see what happens. So the first cut. Okay, now notice I push down and nothing really happens until I move it, and then all of a sudden the knife falls through. Okay, that's a feature of that, that lower grit edge finish, is that they slice really, really well. You do have some push cutting ability, but the second you move it forward or back, that's when the cutting starts. So let's just do a push cut on it then. See, the push cut does happen, but it takes quite a bit of force to do a push cut. But the second you put force on it and then pull it back, it just drops right through it. Okay, so that's our 325. Here's our 6,000 grit. This one right here, it ought to start push cutting quite a bit easier, but you shouldn't have that same amount of slicing aggression that you do with the 325. So we'll do a normal slice first. Okay. Another normal slice, that's actually going through pretty good. And then we'll do a push cut. See, it push cut quite a bit easier than that 325, but doesn't slice as aggressively as the 325. It's actually not a bad edge for doing this, where it's, that's a pretty clean cut of meat. There's not a whole lot of sinew or fat or anything like that in there. And now let's take the highly polished edge. I would guess that this one would push cut really, really easy, but would not have near the slicing aggression that either one of those do, because the edge has been so polished. So a push cut is pretty nice. It's parting it, but it doesn't feel very aggressive on the slice. It is working, and it's working quite a bit better than I would have thought, but it doesn't have that same feedback through the blade where you can feel that edge just ripping right through it. Okay, so that's on the little bitty blades. So now let's go ahead and do kind of the same thing with the larger blades, and then we'll get a much better idea, because people don't typically chunk up a big piece of sirloin with a pocket knife. So we're going to square up the ends of these, put the ends into the burger bucket, and then we'll lay out the steaks over here, and then I'll wrap them here. So we'll square up the end. Now see, that grabbed and pulled, this is a 325 grit, it grabbed the silver skin off the top and pulled it into the rest of the cut. Okay. Now let's do the 6,000 grit edge. That's actually pretty dang nice for that style of a cut. It's not pulling the silver skin into the cut. It's not slicing as aggressively, but it is doing pretty dang good. Now we'll take the polished edge. That's actually the cleanest one of all of them so far, which is now there I'm just pushing. Now I've got the end of it here, and there's not a whole lot to hold on to. Well, I'll be danged, that polished edge just fell through that. I would not have thought that at all. That is surprising to me. Okay, so that was the sirloins. Now let's go opposite way, highly polished edge down to coarser edge. Now this right here, it's slipping around a little bit more. Probably what I ought to show you is, okay, so when you start getting this kind of stuff right here inside a carcass that you have hung for a little while, what that kind of almost slimy looking stuff like down into the middle of the meat, what that is that it didn't get cooled down as fast as the outside portion of the meat. Typically you'll see this on big animals, you know, like elk, or I would assume moose. I've seen it on elk, beef, because beef is a big, you know, big animal with big muscles. But what happened here, I believe, is that in the meat locker, my old meat locker, or cooler, my old meat cooler, the AC was, I mean, it was long and narrow, okay, which the new one is too. But the old one, the AC units came out of the narrow side, or out of the wide side. This new one, so the air would come in and it would hit the opposite wall and it would have to, you know, go either way. This new one, I put the AC unit on the end, so it went, you know, narrow ways down here. And this one, I believe what happened is I had this deer hanging on the opposite end of the cooler. So while, you know, I mean, the whole cooler was at the right temperature, I don't think this one got near as much cooling action, it being in the corner, as the one in the middle. So the meat's still fine. It just, you know, has that feature of it. So next time when I go to hang something up in there, if I've got to hang two animals and I think that first one might block some of that airflow, I'll just put a secondary fan in there and that'll kind of help circulate the air around and cool it down. All right. So where were we? Oh, I was being amazed at this polished edge. That was pretty nice. So was that. Okay, now the 6,000 grit edge. You know, that 6,000 grit edge did pretty good too. Now this right here, what we're happening is that this chunk of meat is, you know, a different muscle group than this one, and so one of them sliding on top of the other one. You know, that 6,000 grit edge did mighty good too, and it still had, you know, it still has slicing aggression, whereas that polished one doesn't. Now we'll go to my favorite 325 grit edge. Oh, see, now that one did just as... You know, they're all three mighty good edges. I was really surprised at that polished edge, though. Okay, and I think... yeah, we'll put that one over here and put this up in the burger pile. Okay, now the last one is this top round. And I suppose, well, we'll go ahead and chunk it up anyway, just because I want to cut some more with these edges. So we'll start with a 325. Now see, this piece of meat does not have hardly any silver skin or anything like that in there. So it's cutting, you know, real clean. That was a 325. That was a 6,000. Okay. And you know, I really can't tell any difference in the surfaces of the cuts. You know, which edge did. I mean, they all look the same to me. Okay, I think we've got enough to do one more cut with each. The 325. Yep. And the 6000. Oh, there's a hair. And then the polished. Boy, I tell you, you know, the 325 is still my favorite. Okay, the 6000, you know, it's really not bad. Now I have been running a 6000 grit edge on this one right here lately. You know, just for the last year or so, you know, as part of the, you know, trying out that 6000 grit edge. You know, I mean, I've been carrying my everyday carry belt knife with a 6000 grit edge, and then my liner lock I've still been carrying with the 325. You know, just so I can continue to, you know, compare and contrast the different edges. Now that polished edge, that is actually an edge that I might actually leave that polished edge on that knife and do some more cut tests with it. I mean, I'm that surprised with it. I mean, typically speaking, a polished edge, you know, that sort of polish, I really don't care for anything other than, you know, shaving my face, those last finish cuts on like a wood carving. You know, like let's say you're making one of them ball in a cages or something, or you know, a figurine or something like that, and you want that real polished look to each individual cut as your surface finish. But that was actually kind of nice. I'm really surprised about that. Another thing that I noticed with the boning knives, so the boning knives, I told you in that last video, I think it was a boning knife, 325 versus 6000 grit. You know, we broke down the shoulders, the front shoulders on that deer with these two knives, one with, you know, one shoulder with each knife. When I broke down the hindquarters with the same setup, so I broke down one with a 325 and one with the 6000. One thing I noticed was that, and I should have left some for you. You know that cut where, like on the back straps, where you've got a whole patch of sinew on the outside, and you know, good clean meat on the inside, and you're trying to take that sinew off. So what you do is you know, lay it flat down on the board, and you insert the tip of your knife at one end, and then you angle that blade, or angle the edge down towards the cutting board, and then just push it. And that has a tendency to just take that silver skin off real nice and clean. I was never able to really get that cut down with a 325 grit edge. What would happen is that the second you started angling that edge down, it cut through the silver skin. I mean, almost instantly. You'd get maybe, you know, if you really babied it, you know, and really tried to feel for the angle, you might get an inch or two worth of cut before you either cut through the silver skin or you started cutting up into the meat. The edge is just entirely too aggressive to make that kind of a cut. That 6000 grit edge, on the other hand, it could make that cut. It really could. I mean, it's highly, that 6000 grit edge is enough less aggressive that it would ride on the top of that silver skin, underneath the meat and on top of the silver skin, and be able to make that cut. Now that I see what that polished edge is doing in these steaks here, you know, Vance has still got to work his deer up. I might go ahead and take, you know, I think I've got another boning knife around here somewhere or other. I might go ahead and put that polished edge on one and just see how it does on, you know, help him out, dress out part of his, or work up part of his deer, and see if that polished edge, you know, if it finishes taking the last little bit of slicing aggression off of that edge and is able to make that push cut real nice and just scrape that meat right off the top of that silver skin or sinew. That'd be a real interesting test. So, so yeah, I'm pretty, like I said, I am pretty dang amazed with that polished edge. Yeah, we'll go ahead and include it. Today I'm shooting a whole bunch of different videos. That's why I've got the hat on, is because I like to, put like glasses on, a shirt, so that way when I'm editing I can kind of tell which clip went to which video. I've got a mule deer neck roast going on right now, and I've got to cut the veggies up here in about another hour to go in with it. So I might go ahead, and I was going to videotape that with the chef's knives, and I think I'm going to include that polished edge in there, and we'll just see how that does. I tell you, this is a pretty exciting day, learning that about those. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get these wrapped up and get all this cleaned up, and that way I can kind of finish cooking dinner and then get on to the next set of videos. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.